A millionaire woman has a flat tire in the rain, homeless twins help. She's stunned who they are. The black Mercedes cut through the stormy night like a blade, its headlights barely penetrating the thick curtain of rain. Elizabeth Thompson hadn't expected her night to end this way, drenched in an evening gown worth thousands, staring at two small figures through her rain-streaked windshield. The flat tire seemed like fate's cruel joke, but what made her heart truly stop was the older girl's face illuminated by lightning. 7 years old, maybe 8, with eyes that carried wisdom far beyond her years. "We can help," the girl said, her voice clear despite the thundering rain. "I learned from Dr. Miller," the smaller one, clutching her sister's hand, nodded enthusiastically, revealing a gap-toothed smile. Elizabeth's manicured fingers tightened on the steering wheel. The name struck her like another bolt of lightning. Dr. James Miller, the man whose reputation she had helped destroy 6 years ago during the Hope Valley takeover. What were the chances? 2 children, alone on a stormy road, mentioning that name of all names. As another flash of lightning illuminated their faces, Elizabeth saw something hauntingly familiar in their features, something that made her stomach twist with an inexplicable dread. She didn't know it yet, but this rainy night would unravel everything she had built her empire upon. The Thompson Manor loomed against the morning sky like a monument to solitude. Elizabeth Beth Thompson stood at her study window, watching the gardeners tend to the immaculate lawns that seemed to stretch endlessly. 20 years of ruthless business decisions had built this empire, but the vast empty halls echoed only with the sound of her heels and occasional visits from her housekeeper, Martha. The morning's Wall Street Journal lay open on her mahogany desk, her latest corporate acquisition splashed across the front page. Thompson Enterprises expands healthcare portfolio, the headline proclaimed. Beth's lips twisted into a bitter smile. If only they knew the real cost of each victory, the lives affected by every boardroom decision. Her phone buzzed incessantly, board members, shareholders, lawyers, all wanting a piece of her time. Beth ignored them, her mind still haunted by those children's faces from the previous night. Their presence in her home now felt like a question mark hanging over her carefully constructed world. Martha knocked softly, entering with the morning coffee. "The little ones are still sleeping, Ms. Thompson." Though the older one, Emma, she was up before dawn, checking all the windows and doors. "Poor things seem scared we'll make them leave." Beth nodded, guilt gnawing at her conscience. How many families had she displaced with her business decisions? How many children had she affected without a second thought? The hostile takeover of Hope Valley Clinic 6 years ago suddenly felt less like a triumph and more like a weight around her neck. Her reflection in the window looked tired, the designer suit and perfect makeup failing to hide the toll of sleepless nights. At 45, she had everything money could buy, yet the manor's 17 bedrooms remained empty, the dining room too large for one person, the garden paths too quiet for a single set of footsteps. The morning's board meeting agenda sat unopened on her desk. Another healthcare facility acquisition, another community to streamline. Beth's hand trembled as she reached for her coffee cup. The similarities were too stark to ignore another small clinic, another group of people who would call her heartless, another Dr. Miller situation waiting to happen. "Will you be joining the children for breakfast?" Martha asked, lingering by the door. Emma tried making pancakes. "Burn them all, but she's determined to keep trying," says her mother taught her that giving up isn't an option. Their mother. Beth felt a chill despite the warm morning sun. Something about these girls tugged at her memory, like a word stuck on the tip of her tongue. She had built her empire on being able to read people, to spot patterns, to analyze every detail. But these children, they represented a puzzle she couldn't solve, a part of her past coming back to haunt her. The sound of childish laughter echoed through the halls, so foreign in this mausoleum of success she called home. For the first time in decades, Beth Thompson felt truly uncertain about her path forward. The empire she had built suddenly seemed hollow, its foundation shakier than she'd ever realized. Walking to her desk, she picked up the latest acquisition proposal. The name of the small clinic jumped out at her New Hope Medical Center. Her hands trembled as she set it down. Some coincidences feel too perfectly orchestrated to be chance. As another burst of laughter filtered through her door, Beth realized that her carefully ordered world was about to change forever. Beth found Emma and Lucy in the manor's vast kitchen, flour dusting every surface like fresh snow. Emma stood on a stepping stool, her small face scrunched in concentration as she attempted another pancake. Lucy sat at the counter, hugging a worn teddy bear, her gap-toothed smile brightening as Beth entered. "Mr. Miller taught me to make breakfast too," Emma said, without looking up, her voice carrying that unsettling maturity. "He said everyone should know how to take care of themselves." She flipped the pancake with surprising skill, though the edges were still charred. Beth pulled up a chair, watching the sisters interact. Emma, despite her young age, moved with the precision of someone used to caring for others. She tested the temperature of Lucy's hot chocolate before allowing her sister to drink it, cut the pancakes into small pieces, and kept glancing at the kitchen exits, a habit Beth recognized from abuse survivors. "How long have you known Dr. Miller?" Beth asked carefully, noting how Emma's shoulders tensed at the question. Lucy answered before her sister could stop her. "Since Mommy went to find the special doctor. Mr. Miller let us stay in his shop when it rained. He told us stories about the Magic Valley where people got better." "Lucy," Emma warned, shooting her sister a look beyond her years, but Lucy, innocent and eager, continued. "He knew Mommy from before, from when she helped people get better too. But then the bad people came and—" "That's enough," Emma interrupted sharply, her small hands gripping the spatula tightly. "Mrs. Thompson doesn't need to hear all that." Beth felt her throat tighten. The Magic Valley, could they mean Hope Valley? And their mother, someone who helped people get better? The pieces were starting to form a picture she wasn't sure she wanted to see. Martha entered with fresh milk, her eyes softening at the mess. "Emma, dear, why don't you let me help with those pancakes?" "I can do it myself," Emma insisted, though her voice wavered. "I have to. Mommy said we have to be strong until she comes back. It's been 3 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days." Beth exchanged a glance with Martha. The precise counting, another sign of trauma, of a child trying to maintain control in an uncontrollable situation. "Your mother," Beth began gently. "What's her name?" Emma's response was calculated. "Just Mummy. She's Mummy." But Lucy, still too young to understand secrecy, piped up again. Her special doctor name was Dr. Ben. Emma's sharp cry cut through the kitchen. The pancake she was flipping fell to the floor, and suddenly the little girl's composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at the ruined breakfast. Beth moved instinctively, reaching for Emma, but the girl flinched away. "I'm sorry about the mess," she whispered, looking terrified. "Please don't make us leave. Lucy needs a warm place to sleep." The fear in her voice broke something in Beth's heart. How many nights had these girls spent in the cold? How long had Emma carried the weight of protecting her sister? "No one's making you leave," Beth assured them, her voice firm. "You can stay as long as you need to." As Martha cleaned up the fallen pancake and started a fresh batch, Beth watched the sisters whisper to each other. Emma's protective stance, Lucy's complete trust in her sister, the way they seemed to communicate without words, it reminded her of something, or someone, from long ago. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, illuminating the flour dust in the air like floating stars. In that moment, Beth Thompson, the ruthless CEO who had built an empire on tough decisions, felt something she hadn't experienced in years: the desperate need to protect someone other than herself. Later that afternoon, Beth retreated to her study, pulling out a dusty file marked Hope Valley Acquisition 2018. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, years of buried memories threatening to surface. The first page held a photograph of a modest clinic nestled in a valley surrounded by ancient oak trees. Below it, a mission statement caught her eye where hope heals hearts. The next document made her pause, a newspaper clipping from 6 years ago. Hope Valley Clinic, a beacon of mental health innovation, the headline read. The article featured a photo of 2 women standing proudly before the clinic's entrance. Beth recognized herself, younger and sharper-edged, but the other woman's face had been carefully cut out of the picture. Dr. Sarah Bennett and Elizabeth Thompson announced groundbreaking partnership, the caption read. Beth's throat tightened. She remembered that day clearly now, the excitement, the promises, the betrayal that would follow. Deeper in the file, financial reports told a different story from what she'd presented to the board. Hope Valley hadn't been failing, it had been breaking even, with patient success rates far above industry standards. But someone had wanted that land, and Beth had been too ambitious, too eager to prove herself, to question why. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, quickly closing the file. Martha entered, looking troubled. "Miss Thompson, there's something you should see." She handed Beth a worn notebook. "I found this while making the girls' beds. It fell from Emma's backpack." The notebook's pages were filled with careful children's handwriting, listing names, dates, and locations. Beth's heart sank as she recognized some of them former Hope Valley patients, staff members, their current whereabouts meticulously tracked. June 15th, Dr. Miller says Mummy went to find help. He promises to watch us. July 1st, Lucy got sick. Dr. Miller knew which medicine to give her. August 20th, Dr. Miller disappeared. Said bad people were asking questions. September 5th, found his shop empty. Only his old coat left. The entries continued, each one more heartbreaking than the last. These weren't just random notes, this was a 7-year-old's attempt to hold on to her vanishing world. Beth turned to the last page, where a newspaper clipping had been carefully preserved. It showed the Hope Valley building being demolished, but what caught her attention was the crowd of protesters in the background. Among them, barely visible, stood Sarah Bennett, holding 2 small children. "My God," Beth whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. She rushed to her computer, pulling up old Hope Valley records. There it was, Dr. Sarah Bennett's staff photo, the same high cheekbones as Emma, the same determined set of the jaw. Martha watched from the doorway. "Ms. Thompson, are you all right?" Their mother Beth managed, her voice hoarse. "She was my partner at Hope Valley. I destroyed her career, drove her away. And now her children." The irony was almost too much to bear. 6 years ago she'd justified her actions as necessary business decisions. Now those decisions had literally shown up on her doorstep, wearing small shoes and asking for pancakes. A child's laugh echoed from the garden, Lucy, playing with the teddy bear. Beth moved to the window, watching as Emma hovered protectively nearby, always vigilant, always watching. Just like their mother had been, before everything fell apart. The setting sun cast long shadows across the manor's grounds, and Beth Thompson realized she stood in one of her own making. The empire she'd built suddenly felt like a house of cards, and somewhere out there Sarah Bennett's absence echoed in her daughter's careful habits and guarded eyes. The morning board meeting at Thompson Enterprises hummed with tension. Beth sat at the head of the table, half listening to Thomas Richards' presentation about their latest healthcare acquisitions. Her mind kept drifting to the 2 girls currently attending their first day at Riverside Elementary School. And finally, Thomas concluded, "We've identified another potential acquisition target. A small mental health facility just outside of Portland." He slid glossy documents across the mahogany table. Remarkably similar to Hope Valley's situation. Beth's head snapped up at the mention of Hope Valley. Similar how? Financially vulnerable, but sitting on valuable real estate. The development potential is... "Did you say valuable real estate?" Beth interrupted, a memory stirring. She recalled a mysterious meeting 6 years ago, just before the Hope Valley takeover. Thomas had insisted the land held untapped potential. After the meeting, Beth retreated to her office, pulling out old Hope Valley files. Something wasn't adding up. The land surveys from before the acquisition showed nothing special, just a modest clinic in a peaceful valley. But here, buried in the final settlement papers, was a second survey commissioned by Thomas himself. Her office phone buzzed. "MS Thompson? There's a Margaret Walsh from the Daily Chronicle asking about Hope Valley." Beth froze. Margaret Walsh, the investigative reporter who'd tried to expose corporate fraud in healthcare 6 years ago. The same reporter Thomas had assured her was handled. "Put her through," Beth said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "MS. Thompson." Margaret's voice crackled through the speaker. "I've been looking into some interesting connections between Hope Valley's closure and certain mineral rights contracts filed shortly after." "Mineral rights?" Beth's mouth went dry. "Yes, quite valuable ones, apparently. Signed over to a shell company that, coincidentally, shares an address with one of your board members' private investments." The pieces started falling into place. Thomas's insistence on the acquisition, the rushed board approval, Sarah's desperate attempts to save the clinic. Beth had assumed it was just about real estate development. Her computer pinged with an email from her private investigator. Found something in old land records. Hope Valley site sits on significant lithium deposits. Mining rights worth millions. Transfer papers dated 1 week after closure. Beth's hands trembled as she opened her desk drawer, pulling out the original Hope Valley contract. There, in the fine print, she'd never bothered to read carefully, all mineral and subsurface rights to be transferred to Highland Development Corp. A quick search revealed Highland Development's registration: Thomas Richardson, sole owner. The phone buzzed again. "MS Thompson? The school is calling about Emma Bennett." Bennett. The name hit her like a physical blow. She'd known, of course, since finding the notebook, but hearing it officially made everything terribly real. They found an old Hope Valley, Idaho card in her backpack. They're asking about guardianship paperwork. Beth stared at the contract in her hands, then at Thomas's smiling photo on the company website. She'd been played for a fool, and Sarah Bennett, brilliant, dedicated Sarah, had paid the price. Now her children were sleeping in the home of the woman who'd helped destroy their lives. A news alert popped up on her screen: lithium mining operation approved in former healthcare district. The accompanying photo showed Thomas shaking hands with mining executives. Beth reached for her phone, her decision made. Get me Margaret Walsh back. And call my lawyer. She looked out her office window at the city skyline she'd helped build. It's time to set things right. The homeless shelter on 5th Street buzzed with activity as Beth made her way through the crowded dining area. She felt painfully out of place in her designer suit, drawing curious glances from volunteers serving evening meals. "Dr. Miller?" she asked an elderly volunteer. "James Miller." The woman's face softened with recognition. "Jimmy? He usually comes in for dinner, but we haven't seen him for a few days." "Not since he gave away his coat to those 2 little girls." Beth's heart quickened. "Do you know where I might find him?" "Try the old auto shop on Cedar Street. He sometimes fixes cars there for folks who can't afford a regular mechanic." The abandoned auto shop stood like a ghost in the fading daylight. Through grimy windows, Beth spotted movement: a stooped figure shuffling between old tools and parts. "Dr. Miller," she called, pushing open the creaky door. The man who turned to face her bore little resemblance to the distinguished physician she remembered from Hope Valley. His white hair was unkempt, his clothes threadbare, but his eyes still held the sharp intelligence she remembered. "Elizabeth Thompson," he said quietly. "I wondered when you'd come." The girls Beth started. "Emma and Lucy." "Are Sarah's daughters," he finished. "Yes, I've been watching over them since she left." though I suspect you figured that out already." Beth moved closer, noticing the medical textbooks stacked in a corner, covered in grease stains. "Why didn't you tell me who they were that night?" Miller picked up a wrench, turning it over in his weathered hands. Would it have made a difference? The Elizabeth Thompson I knew 6 years ago wouldn't have stopped for any stranded motorist, let alone 2 homeless children. The truth of his words stung. "What happened to you, James, after Hope Valley?" "What happens to most people when their life's work is destroyed?" His voice carried no anger, only sadness. "I tried other hospitals, but Thomas Richardson's influence runs deep. No one would hire the unstable doctor who opposed the mighty Thompson enterprises." He reached into an old filing cabinet, pulling out a thick envelope. "I kept records, Elizabeth, everything. The real financial reports, the land surveys Thomas tried to bury, Sarah's original partnership agreement with you." Beth's hands shook as she took the envelope. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because Sarah's daughters trust you," he said simply. "And because I saw something in your eyes that night, something I haven't seen since before Hope Valley fell humanity." A distant siren wailed, and Miller tensed. "They've been watching me. Thomas's men. I've moved the girls around, kept them safe, but I'm old, Elizabeth. I can't protect them much longer." "Let me help," Beth pleaded. "Tell me where Sarah is." Miller's eyes clouded. "Sarah." She was so strong, even after everything. But when they threatened to take the girls, he paused, swallowing hard. "The last time I saw her, she mentioned finding a place called New Dawn Valley. Said it was her last hope." Beth felt her blood run cold. New Dawn was one of Thompson Enterprises' psychiatric facilities, the kind that specialized in difficult cases. "Go now," Miller urged, pressing a key into her hand. "Safety deposit box, First National Bank. Everything you need is there. Just promise me you'll make it right." As Beth turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Elizabeth? Sarah never told the girls what you did. She said hate would only poison their hearts. Remember that when the truth comes out." Back in her office, Beth spread Dr. Miller's documents across her desk. Her private investigator, Michael Carson, sat opposite her, reviewing admission records from New Dawn Valley. "But it's not good," he said, looking up from his laptop. "Sarah Bennett was admitted 3 months ago under the name Hope Vale. The paperwork was pushed through by Thomas Richardson himself." Beth felt sick. Involuntary commitment. Based on claims of paranoid delusions about corporate conspiracy and threats to expose fraud, Michael's voice dripped with irony. All signed off by a Dr. Andrew Pierce. Pierce, Beth frowned. He was on Thomas's payroll during the Hope Valley takeover. She opened the safety deposit box key Dr. Miller had given her. Inside lay more damning evidence, photographs of secret meetings between Thomas and mining executives, dated before Hope Valley's closure, medical records showing Sarah's perfect mental health evaluation just weeks before her breakdown, and most disturbing, a letter from Sarah to her daughters. "My dearest Emma and Lucy," Beth read aloud, her voice catching. "If you're reading this, something has happened to me. They're watching our house, following us to school. Mr. Richardson says he'll take you away if I don't stop asking questions about the mine." The letter continued, detailing Sarah's plans to gather evidence, her desperate search for legal help, and her fear for her children's safety. The final paragraph made Beth's heart stop. "Remember the story of the 2 sisters separated by a storm? How they found each other years later and discovered they were stronger together? Keep that story close to your hearts, my darlings. Sometimes family finds us in unexpected ways." Beth's hands trembled. That story, she hadn't thought about it in decades. Her own mother used to tell it to her and her baby sister before the divorce, before their parents split them up before. MS. Thompson Michael's voice snapped her back. "There's more. The admission records at New Dawn show Sarah's been heavily sedated, kept isolated, But here's the thing, a nurse filed a complaint last week about inappropriate medication levels. Beth reached for her phone, dialing Margaret Walsh. I need everything you have on New Dawn Valley. And Margaret, bring a photographer. We're going to blow this wide open. As she hung up, Emma's voice echoed from the doorway. Is that about my mum? Beth turned, startled. The girl stood there, small but determined, clutching her notebook. You found her, didn't you? Emma, Beth began, but the girl cut her off. Lucy and I heard you talking to Mr. Miller on the phone. We know she's in a hospital. Is she? Is she sick, like they said she was? Beth moved to kneel before Emma, seeing Sarah's strength in those young eyes. No, sweetheart, your mom isn't sick. She's very brave, and some bad people wanted to stop her from telling the truth. But we're going to help her now. Emma's lower lip trembled. Promise. I promise, Beth replied, and for the first time in her career, saying those words didn't feel like a business transaction. As Emma left the room, Beth turned back to Michael. Get me everything on Thomas Richardson's private holdings, and find out who's signing those medication orders at New Dawn. The pieces were falling into place, but Beth couldn't shake the nagging feeling about Sarah's story, the two sisters, the storm, the reunion. Something tickled at the edges of her memory, something about her own past that seemed suddenly terrifyingly relevant. Dawn broke over the Thompson manor, bringing with it the now familiar sounds of Lucy's giggles and Emma's quiet instructions from the kitchen. Beth paused in the doorway, watching as Emma demonstrated the proper way to flip pancakes to her younger sister. See? Mr. Miller said it's all in the wrist, Emma explained, her face scrunched in concentration. Mummy used to say cooking is like science, you have to be patient and follow the steps. Beth stepped forward, rolling up her expensive silk sleeves. May I join you? Emma hesitated, then nodded. Over the past week, her wariness had begun to soften, though she still kept her guard up. Lucy, however, bounced excitedly. Can you make them shaped like hearts? Mummy did that on special days. I've never tried, Beth admitted, but we can learn together. As they worked, Lucy chattered about their new school, while Emma quietly monitored her sister's every word. Beth noticed how the older girl would tense whenever their mother was mentioned, how her eyes would dart to the exit habits of someone used to running. That night, the screams started just after midnight. Beth rushed to the girls' room to find Emma thrashing in her sleep, crying out, "Don't take her. Please, we'll be quiet." Lucy sat beside her sister, tears streaming down her face. She has bad dreams, Lucy whispered. About the night the men came to our house. Beth gathered Emma into her arms, feeling the child's racing heart. You're safe now, she murmured. No one's going to take you away. Emma woke with a start, initially stiffening at Beth's touch before collapsing into tears. They were wearing suits, she sobbed. Like Mr. Richardson's. They said Mummy was sick, that they'd put us in different homes if she didn't go away. Beth's heart clenched. She knew those tactics had even approved similar strategies in other corporate takeovers, but seeing the human cost holding its trembling aftermath in her arms changed everything. Would you like to sleep in my room tonight? Beth offered. Both of you. To her surprise, Emma nodded. Soon both girls were curled up in her massive bed, Lucy clutching her teddy bear, Emma finally relaxing into true sleep. The next morning, Beth called her office. Cancel my meetings. I'm taking the girls shopping. At the department store, Lucy's eyes went wide at the toy section, while Emma lingered by the practical items: warm coats, sturdy shoes. Beth insisted on both, watching as Emma's pragmatic shell cracked just enough to admire a purple backpack with silver stars. Mummy would say it's too expensive, Emma protested weakly. Your mother would want you to have beautiful things, Beth responded, remembering Sarah's own appreciation for life's small joys. Later, over ice cream and other luxury the girls had clearly been denied, Lucy asked innocently, "Can we call you Aunt Beth, since you take care of us like family?" Beth's spoon clattered against the bowl. Emma watched her carefully, protectively, but there was curiosity in her eyes too. "I'd be honored," Beth managed, her throat tight with emotion. That night, arranging their new clothes in the dresser, Beth found a folded paper in Emma's old coat, a photograph of Sarah holding her daughters, all three laughing at something off camera. Their happiness was palpable, their bond unshakable. "I'll bring her back to you," Beth whispered to the photograph. "I promise." The local diner buzzed with Sunday morning activity when Beth took the girls for breakfast. She hadn't expected the reaction their presence would cause. The elderly waitress dropped her coffee pot when she saw Emma and Lucy, tears springing to her eyes. "Sarah Bennett's little ones," she whispered. "Lord above, we've been worried sick about you girls." Word spread quickly through the diner. Soon people began approaching their booth, each with a story about Hope Valley and Sarah Bennett. "Your mama helped my Tommy when no other doctor would," one woman said, squeezing Lucy's hand. "Spent 3 hours just talking to him. Found out his dyslexia was making him act out. Now he's in college." A gruff-looking truck driver stopped by. "Dr. Bennett saved my marriage. Couldn't afford therapy, but she set up payment plans. Saw us after hours." That's the kind of person she was. Emma sat straighter with each story, pride replacing her usual wariness. Lucy beamed, soaking in the warmth of people who remembered them not as homeless children, but as Sarah Bennett's beloved daughters. The diner's owner, Mary Sullivan, pulled up a chair. "We all tried to help when that fancy corporation came sniffing around. Raised money for legal fees, wrote letters to the board. But they'd already decided." She looked pointedly at Beth. "Isn't that right, MS Thompson?" Beth felt the weight of every eye in the diner. These weren't just disgruntled former patients, they were a community torn apart by corporate greed. Her corporate greed. The closure was Beth began, but Mary cut her off. It was a tragedy. "Dr. Bennett didn't just run a clinic, she built a family. When my John died, she organized meals for months. Got my grandson into art therapy, didn't charge a dime. Then suddenly some suits decide it's not profitable enough." A retired teacher joined in. "Remember the Christmas program? Sarah got those pharmaceutical companies to donate toys, made sure every child in need had something under their tree." And the support groups added another voice. "My sister's still sober because of those meetings." Beth watched Emma absorb every word, cataloguing these precious memories of her mother. Lucy curled into her sister's side, unusually quiet in the face of such emotional outpouring. Mary leaned forward, her voice low. "We've been watching that new Dawn place. Something ain't right there. Cars coming and going at odd hours, patients who look drugged out of their minds. If Sarah's in there—" "She is," Beth confirmed quietly, "and I'm going to get her out." The diner fell silent. Mary studied Beth's face, searching for sincerity. Finally she nodded. "About time you did something right, MS Thompson. We're behind you, all of us. Just say the word." As they left, people pressed notes into Emma's hands, stories about their mother, photos from clinic events, promises of support. The little girl who'd been so careful to forget now clutched these memories like treasures. In the car, Lucy asked softly, "Aunt Beth, why did all those people love Mummy so much?" Beth caught Emma's eye in the rearview mirror, seeing Sarah's same determination reflected there. "Because your mother understood something I forgot a long time ago, sweetheart, that helping people matters more than making money." That evening, Beth found Emma in the Manor's library, surrounded by old newspapers. The girl had spread them across the floor in chronological order, each featuring headlines about Hope Valley's closure. Her small fingers traced the words with disturbing intensity. "You're in all of these," Emma said, without looking up, standing next to the man who came to our house, Mr. Richardson. Beth's heart sank. Emma. Lucy thinks you're different, Emma continued, her voice eerily calm for a 7-year-old. She wants to believe in fairy tales where rich ladies save poor children. But Mummy taught me to look for patterns. Beth sat down on the floor beside her, careful not to disturb the newspaper timeline. What patterns do you see? You owned Hope Valley with Mummy. Then you took it away. Now you're being nice to us. Emma's eyes, so like Sarah's, fixed on Beth. Are you going to take us away too? The question struck like a physical blow. Before Beth could respond, Lucy burst into the room, clutching a photo album she'd discovered in the attic. Aunt Beth. I found pictures of you when you were little. Lucy paused, noticing the tension. Emma? What's wrong? Emma stood protectively in front of her sister. Show me the album, Lucy. Beth watched as Emma flipped through pages of her childhood ballet recitals, birthday parties, family vacations. Then the girl stopped, her hand trembling over a particular photograph. This is you, Emma said slowly, with another little girl. She looks like her voice trailed off. Beth leaned forward, her breath catching. The photo showed 2 young girls at a beach, arms around each other, matching gap-toothed smiles. The second girl's face hit Beth like a thunderbolt. She had Emma's eyes, Lucy's smile. That's my sister, Beth whispered. We were separated when our parents divorced. I never saw her again. Lucy crawled into Beth's lap, something she'd never done before. What was her name? Sarah, Beth breathed. Her name was Sarah. Emma backed away, shaking her head. No, you're lying. You can't be. Mummy would have said. Would she? Beth asked gently. When I was the one who destroyed everything she built. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's face cycled through confusion, anger, and something like hope before settling into determined suspicion. Prove it, she demanded. Prove you're really her sister. Beth reached for her phone, pulling up the photo of Sarah she'd found in Dr. Miller's files. Look at this picture of your mother. Now look at me. Really look. Lucy gasped. Emma, that's why Mummy always told us the story about the sisters in the storm. Remember? The one who got lost and found her way home. Emma's carefully constructed walls began to crack. The story. It was about you. And Mummy. I didn't know, Beth said, tears falling freely now. All these years I never knew the sister I lost was right in front of me. And when I finally found her again, You heard her, Emma finished, but her voice held less accusation now, like the storm in the story hurt the sisters. Lucy wrapped her small arms around Beth's neck, but the sisters in the story found each other again, and they fixed everything. Emma stood very still, studying Beth with new eyes. Finally she spoke, a voice small but clear. If you're really our aunt, if you really want to help, promise me something. Anything, Beth replied. Promise you won't let anyone separate us again. Not me and Lucy, not you and Mummy. No more lost sisters. Beth pulled both girls close, feeling the weight of generations of broken promises and separated families. I promise, we're going to bring your mother home, and this time no storm will tear us apart. Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor to Thompson Manor. Dr. Miller stood on the doorstep, looking frailer than ever, clutching a weathered leather briefcase. They're coming for me, he said without preamble. Richardson's men. I had to bring you this before he thrust the briefcase at Beth, his hands shaking. Inside was a single manila envelope, sealed with wax and marked in event of my death. Sarah Bennett. Beth led Dr. Miller to her study, where Emma and Lucy were doing homework. The girls rushed to hug him, but he kept his eyes on Beth. Open it, he urged. Sarah knew this day might come. She prepared everything. With trembling fingers, Beth broke the seal. Inside, she found documents that made her blood run cold. Photographs of secret meetings between Thomas Richardson and mining executives, dated months before Hope Valley's closure bank statements, showing massive transfers to offshore accounts, and most damning of all, a letter in Beth's own handwriting. "I don't remember writing this," Beth whispered, scanning the document that authorized Sarah's removal from Hope Valley's board. "Because you didn't," Dr. Miller replied. "Richardson forged your signature. He needed both owners to agree to the sale, and when Sarah refused..." Emma, who had crept closer, spoke up. "Is that why the men came to our house that night?" Dr. Miller nodded gravely. "Your mother discovered the forgery. She threatened to expose everything. That's when Richardson decided she was becoming inconvenient." Lucy clutched her teddy bear tighter. "The scary men said Mommy was sick in her head." "A convenient diagnosis," Dr. Miller said bitterly, "especially when you own a private psychiatric facility." Beth spread the documents across her desk, piecing together the cruel puzzle. Richardson hadn't just wanted Hope Valley's land, he'd needed Sarah discredited before she could reveal his scheme. And Beth, blinded by ambition and corporate politics, had been the perfect unwitting accomplice. "There's more," Dr. Miller continued, pulling out a small key. "Safety deposit box at First National. Sarah left evidence there, 2 recordings of Richardson's threats, proof of the forged signatures, everything needed to bring him down." Suddenly, the study door burst open. Martha rushed in, panic on her face. "MS Thompson. Men in suits are coming up the drive." Through the window, Beth spotted 3 black SUVs approaching. Dr. Miller went pale. "They followed me. I led them right to you." Beth sprang into action. "Martha, take the girls to the panic room. Now." "No," Emma protested. "We want to stay with Dr. Miller." "Emma, listen to me." Beth knelt before her niece. "Those men out there, they're the same ones who took your mother. I need you to protect Lucy just like you always have. Can you do that?" Emma's jaws set in determination, so like Sarah it hurt to see. She grabbed Lucy's hand and followed Martha to safety. Dr. Miller handed Beth a final envelope. "Everything else you need to know about Sarah is in here. Find her, Elizabeth. Make this right." Before Beth could respond, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Dr. Miller straightened his shoulders, a shadow of his former dignity returning. "Let me handle this. I've lived a long life, and Sarah, she gave me purpose when I'd lost mine. It's time I returned the favor." Beth watched helplessly as Dr. Miller walked toward the approaching footsteps, his head held high. She had just enough time to hide the documents in her wall safe before Richardson's men entered. The old doctor's voice carried clearly, "Gentlemen, I believe you've been looking for me." New Dawn Valley Psychiatric Facility loomed before Beth, its modern architecture a stark contrast to Hope Valley's warm welcome. She clutched Dr. Miller's envelope, her heart pounding as she approached the reception desk. "I'm here to see Hope Vale," Beth announced, using Sarah's admission name. The receptionist's plastic smile never wavered. "I'm sorry, but MS. Vale isn't accepting visitors. Doctor's orders." "I have authorization from the board," Beth countered, sliding across documents bearing Thompson Enterprises letterhead. Minutes later, she was following a nurse down sterile hallways, the antiseptic smell making her nauseated. But room 317 was at the end of a quiet corridor. Through the small window, Beth saw her sister for the first time in 30 years. Sarah sat in a chair by the window, her once vibrant eyes dulled by medication, her hands trembling slightly as she stared into space. "She's usually quite docile," the nurse commented. "The new medication protocol has been very effective." "What medications?" Beth demanded, scanning the chart at the foot of the bed. The list made her blood run cold. Powerful antipsychotics, sedatives, mood stabilizers, all at maximum dosages. Dr. Pierce's orders, the nurse shrugged. He says she's delusional, keeps talking about conspiracy theories and stolen clinics. Beth entered the room slowly. Sarah. Her sister turned, confusion clouding her features. Beth? No, you're not real. They said you wouldn't come. I'm here, Sarah. I found Emma and Lucy. They're safe. Sarah's eyes cleared slightly at her daughter's names. My girls. Richardson said he'd take them if I didn't cooperate. Had to protect them. Had to stay quiet. Beth took her sister's trembling hands. Listen to me. Dr. Miller gave me everything, the evidence, the forged documents, all of it. We're going to expose Richardson and get you out of here. Miller. He watched over them. Sarah's voice strengthened. The girls, they're really safe. They're at my house. Emma's teaching Lucy to make pancakes. They miss you so much, Sarah. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks. I hear them sometimes in my dreams. Emma's laugh. Lucy's stories. But the medicine makes everything foggy. Beth's fury grew as she watched her sister struggle against the drug-induced haze. How long have they had you on these medications? Since I threatened to expose Richardson, said I was having a breakdown. Paranoid delusions, Sarah's words slurred slightly. Couldn't fight back. Had to protect my girls. A noise in the hallway made them both jump. Sarah grabbed Beth's arm with surprising strength. The safe deposit box. Did Miller give you the key? Yes, I have everything. Beth listened carefully. There's something else. Something about us. About why we were separated. Dad's letter. In the box. The door opened, and Dr. Pierce entered, his smile not reaching his eyes. M.S. Thompson, I'm afraid visiting hours are over. M.S. Vale needs her rest. Beth stood protectively between him and Sarah. I'm taking her out of here. Today. That would be inadvisable, Pierce said smoothly. M.S. Vale is still quite unstable. In fact, I've just signed orders to increase her medication. Sarah's grip on Beth's hand tightened. In that brief contact, Beth felt 30 years of separation, of misunderstandings, of corporate machinations designed to keep them apart. She wouldn't let them win again. No, Beth declared firmly. You're done poisoning my sister. The news spread through the town like wildfire. Mary Sullivan, the diner owner, made the first call. Within hours, the parking lot of New Dawn Valley was filled with familiar faces from the Hope Valley days, former patients, staff members, families whose lives Sarah Bennett had touched. Margaret Walsh from the Daily Chronicle stood at the entrance, camera crew in tow. Sources tell us a prominent patient is being held here against her will, she announced, microphone in hand. The same patient who tried to expose corporate fraud 6 years ago. Beth watched from Sarah's window as more people arrived. The elderly teacher who'd run art therapy sessions at Hope Valley, the truck driver whose marriage Sarah had saved, mothers with children who'd received free care. They carried signs, Free Dr. Bennett and Hope Valley remembers. Look, Sarah Beth whispered to her heavily sedated sister, they never forgot you. Inside the facility, chaos erupted. Staff members, seeing the crowd and news cameras, began questioning Dr. Pierce's orders. A young nurse approached Beth, hands shaking as she handed over a thick file. I've been keeping copies, she whispered. The medication orders, the irregular procedures. It isn't right what they're doing to her. Dr. Pierce burst into the room, face red with anger. This is a private medical facility, you can't just... Actually, came a strong voice from the doorway. Mary Sullivan stood there, flanked by 2 police officers and a man in a suit. Meet David Cohen, State Medical Board investigator. We've been building this case for months. The officers stepped forward, producing a warrant. Dr. Pierce, we need you to come with us. We have some questions about your prescription practices. As Pierce was led away, protesters began singing outside an old Hope Valley tradition, gathering in song for healing. The The sound drifted up to the third floor, and Beth saw tears rolling down Sarah's cheeks. "Amazing Grace," her sister whispered, the words slurred but clear. "We used to sing this at Hope Valley." A commotion at the main entrance drew their attention. Emma and Lucy had arrived with Martha, pushing through the crowd. Beth had told them to stay home, but she should have known better. They were Sarah's daughters, after all. "Let them through," Mary's voice boomed across the parking lot. The crowd parted, forming a path for the two small girls who had become symbols of everything Hope Valley had stood for: family, healing, hope. Emma reached the room first, stopping in the doorway, her brave facade cracking at the sight of her mother. Lucy pushed past her, running straight to Sarah's arms. "Mummy," Lucy cried, burrowing into Sarah's embrace. Emma followed more slowly, her eyes taking in every detail of her mother's condition, understanding far too much for her 7 years. "My brave girls," Sarah murmured, holding them close. "My strong, brave girls." Outside, the crowd had grown larger. Former Hope Valley staff members were giving interviews, sharing stories of Sarah's dedication and Richardson's threats. Police cars arrived with more warrants for Richardson, for board members, for anyone involved in the conspiracy. Beth stood at the window, watching the community she'd once dismissed as unprofitable rally around her sister. Mary Sullivan caught her eye from below and nodded, not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement of change. Beth, Sarah called softly, "Take us home." As Beth helped her sister stand, supporting her weakened body, she realized that home meant something different now. It wasn't just her lonely manor or Sarah's lost clinic. Home was this family reunited, truth exposed, community united. The Thompson Enterprises boardroom crackled with tension. Beth sat at the head of the table, Sarah's medical records and Dr. Miller's evidence spread before her. 12 board members watched nervously as she clicked through a presentation revealing years of corporate fraud. 6 years ago, Beth began, her voice steady, this board approved the acquisition of Hope Valley Clinic based on fraudulent documents. Documents that she paused, swallowing hard, that I failed to verify. Thomas Richardson shifted in his seat, his usual smooth confidence cracking. "Beth, perhaps we should discuss this in private." No more private discussions. Thomas Beth clicked to the next slide, bank statements showing millions flowing into offshore accounts. "You forged my signature to force Sarah Bennett out. You fabricated mental health reports to silence her. And you did it all for mining rights you'd already secretly sold." The boardroom erupted in whispers. Several members began shuffling papers nervously, avoiding eye contact. The vote to close Hope Valley was unanimous. Richardson countered, standing. Every person in this room agreed. "Based on lies," Beth slammed her hand on the table. "You showed us manipulated financial reports. You claimed the clinic was failing when it was breaking even. You hid the real estate assessments showing mineral deposits." An older board member, Janet Crawford, spoke up. "Ms. Thompson, these are serious accusations. Do you have proof?" Beth opened Dr. Miller's briefcase. "Proof. Here's the original land survey Thomas buried. Here are recordings of him threatening Sarah Bennett. And here," she pulled out a thick folder, "are 30 signed affidavits from Hope Valley patients describing Richardson's intimidation tactics." Richardson's face darkened. "You've lost your mind, Beth. Just like your sister." The room fell silent. Beth smiled coldly. "Ah, yes, my sister. The woman you drugged and imprisoned to protect your scheme. Did everyone know that part? That Sarah Bennett, the doctor we discredited and destroyed, is my sister." Several board members gasped. Janet Crawford removed her glasses, rubbing her eyes. "Dear God." "It gets better," Beth continued. "While Sarah was locked away in New Dawn Valley, her 2 young daughters were homeless. The same girls who are now living in my home. My nieces, who watched their mother be dragged away as mentally unstable because she discovered the truth." Richardson stood abruptly. This is absurd. I move to have Elizabeth Thompson removed as CEO, effective immediately. She's clearly suffering from emotional instability. Sit down. Thomas, the command came from Howard Peters, the eldest board member. I think we've all heard enough of your suggestions about mental stability. Security guards entered the room, followed by 2 police detectives. Richardson looked around wildly, realizing he'd lost control. You're destroying everything we built, he snarled at Beth. Years of work, millions in profits. Built on what? Beth challenged. On destroyed lives? On separated families? On drugging innocent people into silence? As Richardson was led away in handcuffs, Beth addressed the remaining board members. I'm calling for an immediate vote. We will return Hope Valley to Sarah Bennett with full compensation for damages. We will establish a fund for all affected families. And we will transform New Dawn Valley into what it should have been, a genuine mental health facility run by qualified doctors, not corrupt businessmen. Janet Crawford stood. I second the motion, and I move to add one more item: the immediate resignation of any board member who knew about Richardson's activities. 3 members quietly stood and left the room. The remaining ones, looking shaken but resolute, raised their hands in unanimous approval. Later, alone in her office, Beth stared at the Hope Valley photograph still on her wall. Her phone buzzed a text from Martha showing Emma and Lucy helping Sarah walk in the manor's garden. The medication was slowly leaving her system, bringing back glimpses of the sister Beth had lost so long ago. A knock at her door revealed Howard Peters. That was quite a show, the old man said kindly. Your parents would be proud. Beth looked up sharply. You knew them. I knew about the sisters separated by divorce. Knew about Richardson finding out and using it to his advantage. Kept quiet too long. I'm afraid he placed an envelope on her desk. Maybe this will help make amends. It's my letter of resignation and everything I know about why your parents really separated you two. Beth found Sarah in the manor's library, surrounded by old photo albums. Her sister's hands were steadier now, 3 days after leaving New Dawn, though her eyes still carried a medicated haze. Emma and Lucy sat on either side of her, eagerly pointing out pictures. Look, Mum, Lucy exclaimed. Aunt Beth has the same smile as you. Sarah traced a photograph of 2 little girls building a sandcastle. We were happy once, she murmured, before the storm. What storm? Emma asked, her detective instincts alert. Beth sat beside them, Howard Peters' envelope heavy in her hands. The storm that separated us. At least that's what we were told. But this, she held up the envelope, might tell us different. Sarah's hands trembled as Beth opened the envelope, revealing yellow documents and a handwritten letter. Our father's handwriting, Beth noted, unfolding the paper. My dearest daughter, she read aloud, if you're reading this, the truth has finally come out. The story of your separation wasn't what you thought. There was no custody battle, no storm of divorce. There was only fear, my fear. Sarah reached for Beth's hand as she continued reading. Thompson Enterprises wasn't just a company. It was built on dangerous connections, threats, and secrets. When those secrets threatened to expose my partners, they gave me a choice: separate my daughters and keep one safe in the company's fold, or lose everything, including possibly my life. I chose to save you the only way I could. Lucy crawled into her mother's lap, sensing the tension. Emma moved closer to Beth, her young face serious. Elizabeth, they groomed you for the company, shaped you into what they needed. Sarah, I sent you to your aunt, hoping distance would protect you. The pain of separation was better than the danger of keeping you together. But I was wrong. The very thing I feared, the company's corruption, found you anyway. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks. All those years, I thought you chose Beth over me. And I thought you'd abandoned us, Beth whispered. They told me you and Mom ran away." The letter continued. Richardson knew the truth. He found these documents, used them to manipulate the company's path. When Sarah opened Hope Valley, when you two nearly discovered each other, he orchestrated its destruction to keep you apart. Emma spoke up, her voice small but clear. "Is that why the bad men came after Mum? Because she's your sister?" Beth nodded. Richardson knew if we ever reunited, if we ever compared our stories, we'd uncover everything Sarah finished. The corporate fraud, the illegal deals, the real reason Hope Valley had to fall. Lucy tugged at the letter. "Keep reading, Aunt Beth." "My greatest regret is not finding the courage to fight back, to keep you together. But perhaps this truth can help heal what my cowardice broke. In the family vault at First National Bank, you'll find everything proof of Richardson's crimes going back decades. The evidence of forced separations of other families, the true ownership documents of Thompson Enterprises." Beth's voice caught on the last paragraph. "Sarah, your strength in building Hope Valley, in helping others heal, makes me proud beyond words. Elizabeth, your business success, though shaped by their influence, comes from your own brilliant mind. Together you could be unstoppable. Together you could make Thompson Enterprises what it should have been, a force for good." The library fell silent as the letter ended. Emma, wise beyond her years, looked between her mother and aunt. "So, you didn't abandon each other? The bad men made you separate." Sarah pulled her daughters close. "No, sweetheart. We never wanted to be apart. And now we'll never be separated again," Beth finished firmly. "Richardson's gone, his network is exposed, and tomorrow we're going to that vault. It's time to rebuild everything Hope Valley, Thompson Enterprises, our family." Lucy, ever the optimist, brightened. Like the sisters in the story, they found each other and lived happily ever after. "Yes, darling," Sarah smiled, the fog in her eyes clearing with purpose. "But first we have work to do, people to help, wrongs to right." Beth gathered the scattered photos, pausing at one of their father. He thought separating us would keep us safe. Instead, it made us vulnerable. But now we're stronger together, Sarah agreed. Just like Hope Valley always taught, healing happens when we connect, not when we divide. As the sisters embraced, Emma and Lucy between them, Beth realized that healing their family might be the first step in healing everything else that had been broken. The press conference room at Thompson Enterprises was packed wall to wall with reporters. Beth stood at the podium, Sarah by her side, both sisters presenting a united front. The headlines from the morning papers still blazed: Thompson CEO exposes corporate conspiracy, and Hope Valley doctor vindicated. "Ladies and gentlemen," Beth began, her voice firm despite her trembling hands. "Today I'm announcing my resignation as CEO of Thompson Enterprises." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Sarah squeezed her sister's hand as Beth continued. "Furthermore, I'm transferring controlling interest of the company to a new charitable trust, jointly overseen by myself and Dr. Sarah Bennett. The Sarah Bennett Foundation will dedicate its resources to establishing mental health clinics in underserved communities, starting with the rebuilding of Hope Valley." Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but Beth remained steady. "Every property acquired through Richardson's fraudulent schemes will be reviewed. Those taken unjustly will be returned to their rightful owners, with compensation." "M.S. Thompson," a reporter called out, "sources say this decision will cost you personally over $200 million. Why sacrifice everything you've built?" Beth looked at Sarah, then at Emma and Lucy sitting in the front row. "Because some things matter more than money. Family, truth, making amends." Later that evening, Beth sat in her study, watching the movers pack up her awards and corporate mementos. Sarah entered with 2 cups of tea, looking more like herself each day. "You didn't have to give up everything," Sarah said softly. "We could have found another way." Beth shook her head. The company's wealth came from destroyed lives, families separated, communities broken. Like ours. I can't keep profiting from that pain. Emma appeared in the doorway, clutching her notebook. Aunt Beth, the people from your charity foundation are here. They want to know about Hope Valley's new plans. Tell them I'll be right there. Sweetheart Beth turned to Sarah. Ready to show them your vision. Sarah straightened her shoulders. Our vision. But Beth, your house, your savings. The manor will make a perfect administrative center for the foundation, Beth smiled. And I'm keeping the east wing for us, all of us, if you'll stay. Lucy burst in, excitement overriding her usual shyness. Mom, the big truck is bringing your old desk from Hope Valley. Mr. Sullivan found it in his garage. The sisters watched their daughters run off together, no longer carrying the weight of survival on their small shoulders. We'll need to sell my art collection, Beth mused, and the vacation properties. Everything Richardson touched needs to go. The board thinks you're crazy, Sarah noted, giving up an empire for a clinic. Let them. I spent years building walls of wealth while you built bridges of healing. It's time I learned from my little sister. Their conversation was interrupted by Martha, looking flustered. MS Thompson, Dr. Bennett, there's a crowd gathering outside. At the manor's gates, they found former Hope Valley patients and staff members, carrying candles and signs of support. Mary Sullivan stood at the front, megaphone in hand. We heard about the sacrifice you're making, Mary called out. We're here to help. My diner's hosting a fundraiser. Tom's offering his construction crew for rebuilding. Sarah saved us all at some point. Now it's our turn. Emma tugged at Beth's sleeve. See, Aunt Beth? You're not losing everything. You're gaining a family. A big one. Beth felt tears well up as she surveyed the crowd, not wealthy shareholders or corporate allies, but real people whose lives had been touched by her sister's work. The funny thing is, Beth said to Sarah, for the first time in my life I feel truly rich. That night, as the sisters sat in the garden watching Emma teach Lucy to make flower crowns, Beth received one final call from her accountant. MS Thompson, are you absolutely sure about this? Converting the company to a non-profit, surrendering your personal assets. There's no going back. Beth watched Sarah laugh at something Lucy said, the sound healing years of corporate-imposed silence. I'm sure. Some fortunes aren't measured in dollars. Then the papers are ready. Tomorrow it's all gone. Beth hung up, joining her family on the lawn. Emma looked up from her flowers, wise eyes studying her aunt's face. Are you scared? The little girl asked. About not being rich anymore? Beth pulled Emma close. No, sweetheart. For the first time, I'm not scared at all. The call came at dawn. Martha's voice trembled as she woke Beth. They found Dr. Miller in his auto shop. He's asking for you and Sarah. The doctors say there isn't much time. The sisters rushed to County General Hospital, Emma and Lucy trailing behind, unusually quiet. They found Dr. Miller in a private room, his weathered face peaceful despite the machines surrounding him. My girls, he whispered as they entered, all of you together at last, just as it should be. Emma ran to his bedside, grabbing his hand. Mr. Miller, you can't go. You promised to teach me more about cars. The old doctor smiled weakly. Ah, but I've taught you the most important thing, Emma. How to protect what matters most. His eyes found Sarah's, just like your mother taught me. Lucy climbed onto the bed, careful of the tubes. Tell us a story, Dr. Miller, like you used to in the shop. Yes, he agreed, his voice growing fainter. A story about hope, about a young doctor who lost everything in a hospital merger, who gave up on humanity until two little girls showed him courage beyond measure. Beth moved closer, guilt weighing heavy. Dr. Miller, I. No apologies, Elizabeth, he interrupted. You're making it right now. That's what matters. He turned to Sarah. The safety deposit box. There's one more thing. A letter from your mother. Sarah gasped. Our mother? But she died when? When you were separated, yes, but she knew. She knew what your father was planning. Left instructions. A coughing fit interrupted him. Emma held his hand tighter. Please don't leave us. We need you. Dr. Miller touched her cheek gently. You have everything you need now, dear heart. Family. Truth. Each other. His eyes found Beth's. The key is in my coat pocket. In my shop. The blue coat. His voice trailed off as monitors began beeping urgently. Medical staff rushed in, but Dr. Miller raised a trembling hand. No, he said firmly. Let me go peacefully, with my family beside me. Lucy started crying softly. Sarah gathered her youngest in her arms while Emma remained steadfast, holding the old doctor's hand. One last thing, Dr. Miller whispered. In my shop, behind the tool cabinet, proof of other families. Richardson. Separated more than just you two. The documents. Help them. Beth leaned close. I promise. We'll find them all. A slight smile crossed his face. You know, I delivered both of you. Your mother made me promise. To watch over her girls. Never knew it would take so long. His grip on Emma's hand loosened. The monitors fell silent. Later that night, in Dr. Miller's shop, they found the blue coat. In its pocket, the key to another safety deposit box. Behind the tool cabinet, exactly as he'd said, lay files on other separated families victims of Richardson's machinations spanning decades. Emma stood in the middle of the shop, surrounded by the tools he'd used to teach her. He knew, didn't he? All along he knew you were sisters. Sarah nodded, holding Lucy close. He was protecting us, waiting for the right time. Even when everyone thought he was just a homeless man, Beth added, he was still fighting for justice, still keeping his promise to our mother. Lucy picked up a wrench, tears falling. Can we keep the shop open? Help people like he did? Beth and Sarah exchanged looks. Yes, they agreed. We'll make it part of the New Hope Valley, the James Miller Memorial Garage, where everyone can find help, no matter what kind they need. Emma traced her fingers over the workbench where she'd learned to fix cars. He said, I had to protect what matters most, like Mom did, like you're doing now, Aunt Beth. Beth gathered her niece close, and we'll honor his memory by finding every family Richardson tore apart, by making sure no one has to choose between truth and safety ever again. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. 4 generations of promises from their mother to Dr. Miller, from Dr. Miller to the sisters, from the sisters to their daughters converged in this humble auto shop, where a good man had spent his final years fixing more than just cars. The night after Dr. Miller's funeral, Sarah's carefully maintained composure finally shattered. Beth found her sister in the Manor's kitchen at 3 a.m., frantically making pancakes, tears streaming down her face. They have to be perfect, Sarah muttered, tossing another burnt attempt into the growing pile. Emma likes them shaped like hearts. Lucy needs the edges crispy but not too dark. Dr. Miller taught them to expect perfect pancakes. Sarah Beth approached carefully. Let me help. No, Sarah's hand shook as she poured more batter. I have to do this. I have to prove I can take care of them. Richardson's lawyers will use anything against us. They'll say I'm still unstable, still unfit. They'll take my girls again. The mixing bowl clattered to the floor, batter splattering everywhere. Sarah collapsed to her knees, sobs racking her body. I failed them, Beth. I let those men take me away. I left them alone. What kind of mother does that? Beth knelt beside her sister, heedless of the mess. A mother who was protecting them. A mother who endured months of forced medication rather than let Richardson hurt her daughters. But Dr. Miller, Sarah's voice broke. He was there when I couldn't be. He watched over them, taught them, loved them. And now he's gone, and I can't even make their pancakes right. Footsteps in the doorway revealed Emma and Lucy wide-eyed at their mother's breakdown. Emma, ever the protector, moved forward first. "Mummy," she said softly, "we don't need perfect pancakes. We just need you." Lucy ran to join them on the floor, wrapping her small arms around Sarah's neck. Dr. Miller said you were the bravest person he knew, braver than superheroes. Sarah pulled her daughters close, their presence anchoring her. "I hear them in my dreams, Beth, the voices from New Dawn, Pierce's threats, the endless questions designed to make me doubt my own mind." "Those men can't hurt us anymore," Emma declared with fierce certainty. "Aunt Beth made them go away, and she's teaching me to be strong like you." Beth watched her sister rock her daughters, remembering how their own mother must have felt, forced to choose between keeping her children together and keeping them safe. "The medication," Sarah whispered. "Sometimes I still feel foggy. What if I can't be the mother they remember? What if I can't run Hope Valley again?" "Then we'll wait," Beth assured her. "The foundation can handle things until you're ready. You don't have to be perfect, Sarah. You just have to be here." Lucy tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Can we help make pancakes?" "Emma knows the secret recipe now." A watery laugh escaped Sarah. "The secret recipe." "Dr. Miller said the secret ingredient is love," Emma explained seriously. "He said that's why yours were always the best, even when they were a little burnt." Together, the four of them cleaned up the kitchen. As Emma demonstrated her pancake flipping technique, Beth noticed Sarah's hands gradually steadying, her breathing becoming more regular. "You know what Dr. Miller told me," Beth said, measuring out fresh flour. "He said true healing isn't about being unbroken. It's about learning to live with our scars and helping others do the same." Sarah watched her daughters work together at the stove, their small faces intent on their task. He was right. All those years at Hope Valley I thought I was helping others heal. I never realized I was teaching my daughters how to heal me. The sun began to rise as they sat down to slightly misshapen but lovingly made pancakes. Lucy insisted on hearts for everyone. Emma made sure each plate had one perfectly crispy edge, just like her mother used to do. "Dr. Miller would be proud," Sarah said softly, watching her family. "Not of the pancakes, but of this. Of us learning to be whole again." Beth squeezed her sister's hand. "We'll get through the foggy days together, all of us." "Promise?" Sarah asked, a hint of her old vulnerability showing through. "Promise," Emma and Lucy chorused, and Beth nodded firmly. Outside, the first birds began their morning songs, nature's reminder that even the darkest nights eventually yield to dawn. News of Dr. Miller's death traveled through the community like a ripple in still water. The morning after Sarah's breakdown, cars began arriving at Thompson Manor, first a trickle, then a steady stream. Mary Sullivan's diner crew brought breakfast casseroles. Former Hope Valley patients arrived with flowers and handwritten cards. "We heard about Dr. Miller," Mary said, hugging Sarah, "and we know what you're going through, coming off those medications. You're not alone, honey. Not anymore." The manor's grand foyer filled with people, each carrying something: food, flowers, or memories. Tom, the construction worker whose marriage Sarah had saved, arrived with his entire crew. "We've been meeting," he announced, "the whole community. We want to help rebuild Hope Valley. Not just the building, everything it stood for." His wife, Susan, once a Hope Valley nurse, stepped forward. "We've organized a schedule, people to help with the girls, to assist with paperwork, to support Sarah's recovery, just like you supported us all those years." Beth watched from the stairs as her sister was surrounded by love. Emma and Lucy moved through the crowd, collecting stories about their mother they'd never heard. "Your mom helped my Johnny through his darkest days," an elderly woman told them. Sat with him all night when the panic attacks came. Never charged us a dime. Lucy tugged at Beth's sleeve. Aunt Beth, did you know Mummy used to do puppet shows for sick kids? Story time at Hope Valley, another voice chimed in. Every Thursday without fail, your mother made every child feel special. The crowd parted as Margaret Walsh from the Daily Chronicle arrived. Instead of her usual reporter's notebook, she carried a large box. These belonged to Dr. Miller, she explained. Letters from patients, photos from Hope Valley's early days. He kept everything, documented all the lives you touched, Sarah. He wanted the world to know the truth. As they sorted through the box, a pattern emerged not just of healing, but of community. Hope Valley had been more than a clinic, it had been a sanctuary where people found not just medical care, but belonging. We've started a foundation, announced Reverend Parker, his white collar stark against his dark suit, the Miller Bennett Memorial Fund, for families who can't afford mental health care. Sarah, overwhelmed, sank into a chair. Beth moved protectively toward her sister, but Emma got there first. It's okay, Mom, the little girl whispered. These are happy tears, right? Sarah nodded, pulling her daughter close. Dr. Miller always said hope multiplies when it's shared. The day turned into evening, but people kept coming. Someone brought guitars. Hymns and folk songs filled the manor, the same songs they used to sing at Hope Valley gatherings. Remember our Sunday sessions, Susan asked Sarah. Music therapy, you called it. But really it was about bringing people together. Beth watched her sister's face brighten with each memory shared, each story told. The fog of medication and trauma seemed to lift slightly in the warmth of community love. As the sun set, Mary Sullivan stood to make an announcement. We've all agreed. The new Hope Valley won't just be a clinic. It'll be a community center too, with Dr. Miller's garage, Sarah's mental health programs, and space for everything that makes healing possible: music, art, friendship. And pancakes, Lucy added solemnly, making everyone laugh. Tom's construction crew unveiled preliminary drawings. The community had been planning this for weeks, it seemed, waiting for the right moment. See this wing here, Tom pointed. That's the James Miller Memorial Library, for all the knowledge he shared. Sarah stood, steadier now, supported by her daughters and sister. Dr. Miller always said true healing happens in circles, not hierarchies. He would love this, all of us together, building something new from our broken pieces. As the evening wound down, Beth found herself in the garden with Mary Sullivan. You know, Mary said, when you first brought those girls home, we all thought you were just trying to ease your conscience. Beth waited, accepting the judgment. But now we see it, Mary continued. You're not just Sarah's sister by blood. You've got her heart too underneath all that corporate armor. Dr. Miller saw it first, I think. That's why he trusted you that night. Inside, Sarah was laughing at something Emma said, the sound carrying through the open windows. Her sister was healing, not alone in a sterile hospital room, but surrounded by a community that refused to let hope die. We're family now, Mary concluded. All of us. That's what Hope Valley always was, really, a family for those who needed one. The morning they opened their mother's safety deposit box dawned cold and clear. Beth and Sarah stood in the bank's private room, staring at the metal container Dr. Miller had protected for so many years. Are you ready? Beth asked, her hand hovering over the lock. Sarah nodded, gripping Emma's notebook for strength. Inside they found more than documents. A velvet jewelry box held 2 identical lockets, childhood gifts they'd both believed lost in the separation. She kept them, Sarah whispered, opening one to reveal a tiny photo of 2 gap-toothed girls, all this time. Beneath the lockets lay their mother's diary, its pages brittle with age. Beth began reading aloud. My dearest daughters, forgive me for the choices I made. Your father believes separating you will keep you safe from his business partners, but there's more to the story, a truth I've carried alone until now." Sarah sank into a chair, Lucy climbing into her lap while Emma pressed close to Beth's side. "Elizabeth and Sarah, you are more than sisters. You are twins, born during a storm that mirrors the one about to tear our family apart. The doctors said you were identical in every way except one. Your hearts beat in perfect opposition, completing each other's rhythm." Beth's hands trembled as she turned the page. "The company didn't just want to separate you, they wanted to study you. Their research division had a theory about twins, about genetic patterns that could predict business acumen. They wanted to raise one in wealth, one in modest means, tracking your development." "Like an experiment," Sarah breathed. "That's why Dad sent me away, not just to protect us, but to prevent their study." The diary continued. "I couldn't let them treat my daughters like laboratory subjects. So I made a choice. I told your father a partial truth, that separation would protect you. But I never told him about the company's true intentions." Emma looked between her mother and aunt. "That's why you look so alike. You're not just sisters." "The company tracked you anyway," Beth realized. "Richardson knew. That's why he was so determined to keep us apart, to maintain the experiment's conditions." Their mother's final entry brought tears to both sisters' eyes. "My identical girls with opposite hearts, Beth, the corporate warrior, and Sarah, the healer. Apart, they wanted you to represent nature versus nurture. Together, you were always meant to be balance, wholeness, completion." A sealed letter fell from the diary's last pages. Inside, they found evidence of the company's original twin study proposal, along with a list of other pairs separated for research purposes. "All those families in Dr. Miller's files," Sarah said. "It wasn't just about real estate or mining rights. They were continuing the experiment over and over." "Mum tried to warn us with that story," Beth realized. "The sisters in the storm, it wasn't just about separation. It was about finding our way back to wholeness." Lucy tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Is that why you and Aunt Beth can feel each other's feelings sometimes?" The sisters exchanged startled looks. They had noticed it, moments of inexplicable connection, shared instincts, twin awareness they'd attributed to reconciliation. "The opposite hearts," Emma said thoughtfully, "like when Mum was in the hospital and Aunt Beth couldn't sleep, or when Aunt Beth was scared about the board meeting and Mum got headaches." Beth reached for her sister's hand. The moment their fingers touched, they felt it, that familiar rhythm, two hearts beating in complementary patterns, finally reunited. "We have to find the others," Sarah declared. "All the twins they separated. All the families they tried to shape through division." "We will," Beth promised. "Starting today. No more experiments, no more separations." As they left the bank, the sisters wore their childhood lockets, physical symbols of a bond that had survived 30 years of engineered division. Emma and Lucy walked between them, living proof that love could bridge any gap, heal any wound. "Mom," Emma said suddenly, "the New Hope Valley, we should make it a place for separated families to find each other again." Beth and Sarah shared a smile, their twin hearts beating in perfect synchronization. "Yes," they agreed, "a place of wholeness, not division." The courthouse buzzed with tension on the morning of Richardson's trial. Beth and Sarah sat in the front row, their matched lockets catching the light. Emma and Lucy sat between them, holding hands tightly as the charges were read. "Thomas Richardson," the judge intoned, "you stand accused of corporate fraud, medical abuse, conspiracy, and the systematic separation of families for unauthorized human research. How do you plead?" Richardson, his expensive suit now wrinkled from jail time, stood defiantly. "Not guilty, Your Honor. Everything I did was legal under corporate law." Margaret Walsh had done her job well. The evidence was overwhelming: decades of documented separations, falsified medical records, proof of the twin studies that had torn families apart under the guise of corporate research. Dr. Pierce, testifying under immunity, revealed the full scope of New Dawn Valley's involvement. We were instructed to keep certain patients sedated, particularly those who started asking questions about separated siblings. Sarah Bennett wasn't the first, just the one who got closest to the truth. The prosecution called their star witness Janet Crawford, former board member, now turned whistleblower. The twin study program was Thompson Enterprises' darkest secret. We separated dozens of twins, manipulating their lives to test theories about nature versus nurture in business aptitude. Sarah took the stand next, her voice steady as she described her imprisonment at New Dawn. They didn't just drug me, they tried to convince me my memories of Beth were delusions. That Hope Valley had never existed except in my damaged mind. Emma's testimony brought many to tears. Mr. Richardson told us Mummy was crazy, that she made up stories about having a sister. But I remembered the photo in her locket, the same photo Aunt Beth had. They couldn't erase that. Beth's moment came last. Standing before the court, she faced her former mentor. You didn't just separate families, Thomas. You played God with people's lives, thinking you could program success through division. But look at what happened. Your greatest corporate success and your greatest humanitarian failure turned out to be identical twins. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. As the foreman stood, Lucy squeezed her mother's hand. On all counts, we find the defendant guilty. The sentence came swift and harsh: 30 years without parole, 1 year for each year the sisters had been separated. Richardson's network of conspirators faced similar fates. But the true victory came in the judge's final order. Thompson Enterprises would establish a fund to locate and reunite all separated families. The new Hope Valley would become a center for family reunification, with resources for healing and rehabilitation. Outside the courthouse, other twins began to gather, pairs separated by the company's experiments, now finding each other through the evidence in Dr. Miller's files. Beth and Sarah watched as siblings who'd grown up worlds apart recognized their own faces in each other. Your Honor, Beth addressed the judge before proceedings ended. We'd like to propose one more addition to the sentence. Sarah stepped forward with their mother's diary. We want the company's research division converted into a genetic medical center, not to separate twins, but to help them find each other through DNA matching. The judge smiled. Motion granted. Let the record show that Thompson Enterprises will now dedicate its resources to reuniting what it once divided. Later, at Mary's Diner, the community gathered to celebrate. Tom's construction crew had brought preliminary plans for the new genetic center. Former Hope Valley patients shared stories of healing and reunion. See, Mom Emma said proudly. Dr. Miller was right. Sometimes you have to break something completely to build it back better. Lucy, half asleep in Beth's lap, mumbled, "Can we make a special pancake day? For when families find each other again." Sarah looked at her sister, their shared smile reflecting 30 years of enforced separation now transformed into purpose. "Yes," she said, "we'll call it Whole Heart Day, when broken hearts find their missing pieces." Beth touched her locket, feeling its twin against Sarah's chest. Richardson thought he could program success by dividing people. But real success comes from bringing them back together. Outside, the sun set on a new era for Hope Valley and Thompson Enterprises. The story of two separated sisters had become a beacon for others searching for their missing halves, proving that no corporate experiment could overcome the natural yearning of hearts to be whole. The grand reopening of Hope Valley coincided with the first official family reunion day. The restored Victorian building gleamed in the morning sun, its new sign reading Hope Valley Center for Family Reunification and Healing. The old auto shop, now the James Miller Memorial Garage, stood proudly beside it. Inside the main hall, Beth and Sarah watched as dozens of families gathered, twins separated by corporate manipulation, siblings torn apart by Richardson's schemes, all finding their way back to each other. Each reunion had its own story, its own miracle. "Look," Lucy whispered, pointing to a corner where two elderly women were meeting for the first time, touching each other's faces in wonder. They have the same smile. Emma, who had appointed herself official photographer, captured the moment. For Dr. Miller's wall, she explained, he would have wanted to see this. The sisters had transformed the manor's east wing into temporary housing for reuniting families. The west wing now housed the genetic matching center, where Sarah's medical expertise and Beth's business acumen worked in perfect harmony. "Did you ever imagine this?" Sarah asked, watching as another pair of twins discovered each other across the room. "When you found us that rainy night?" Beth shook her head. "I thought I was just helping two lost children. Instead, I found my whole world." Mary Sullivan and her diner crew had outdone themselves, setting up a feast in the garden. Heart-shaped pancakes held pride of place, a tribute to both Dr. Miller and the journey that had brought them here. Mrs. Thompson, a timid voice, interrupted their conversation. A young woman stood before them, clutching a folder. "The genetic center found my sister. She's arriving today. I don't know what to say when I see her." Sarah smiled gently. "Tell her the truth, that your heart has been waiting for its other half." As the day progressed, more families arrived. Each new reunion was celebrated with applause, tears, and Mary's special whole-heart pancakes. The Miller-Bennett Memorial Fund ensured that every family had the resources they needed to rebuild their relationships. Emma and Lucy moved through the crowd, sharing their own story of separation and reunion. They had become symbols of hope for other children in the program, proving that broken families could be made whole again. Aunt Beth Emma called out suddenly, "There's someone here to see you." An elderly man made his way through the crowd. Howard Peters, the former board member who had first revealed the truth about their separation. He carried a large box. "I found these in the company archives," he said, opening it to reveal photographs, letters, and documents. "Your mother's entire correspondence with the research division. Her fight to protect you both. I thought you should have them." As Beth and Sarah sorted through their mother's legacy, they found something unexpected, a recorded message dated just before her death. "My dearest twins," their mother's voice filled the room, crackly but clear. "If you're hearing this, you found each other again. I always knew you would. Love like yours can't be engineered or divided. It can only grow stronger through separation, like two saplings from the same root reaching for each other across any distance." Lucy curled into her mother's lap as the recording continued. Emma stood straight and tall beside Beth, their matching lockets gleaming. The company thought they could create a perfect businesswoman and a perfect healer through separation. They never understood that true perfection comes from wholeness, from balance, from the dance of opposite hearts finding their shared rhythm. Beth reached for Sarah's hand as their mother's final words played "My perfect girls" together again. "Build something beautiful from our broken pieces. Make Hope Valley more than a place. Make it a promise that what was divided will be united, what was broken will be healed." As the sun set on Hope Valley's new beginning, families gathered in the garden for a candlelight vigil. Dr. Miller's favorite hymn filled the air, sung by voices that had found their matching harmonies after years of singing alone. Mom, Emma asked, looking up at Sarah, "Are we whole now?" Sarah looked at her sister, at their daughters, at the families around them finding their way back to wholeness. "Yes, sweetheart, we're whole. And we're going to help others become whole too." Beth squeezed her twin's hand, their hearts beating in that familiar opposite rhythm that made a perfect whole. That's what Hope Valley is now, a place where broken hearts find their missing pieces. 6 months after Hope Valley's reopening, healing took many forms. In the garden therapy sessions, Sarah worked with separated siblings, while Beth used her business expertise to help families rebuild their financial security after years of division. The Manor's kitchen had become a sanctuary of sorts. Every morning, the sisters continued their pancake ritual, But now other families join them, learning to create new traditions while honoring old memories. The hardest part, Sarah told a newly reunited pair of twins, is accepting that we can't get back the lost years. We can only move forward, building something new from what remains. Emma had taken on the role of unofficial guide for children of reunited families. She led support groups in Dr. Miller's garage, sharing her own story of separation and reunion. Sometimes she explained to a young girl whose mother had just found her twin, "It feels weird having two moms who look exactly alike. But then you realize it's double the love, double the family." Lucy, ever the optimist, had started a memory garden where families could plant trees together. Dr. Miller said growing things helps heal broken hearts, she told visitors, and these trees will grow together just like families. The healing wasn't always smooth. Some days Sarah still struggled with the aftermath of her forced medication. Beth would find her sister in the early hours, hands shaking as she tried to perform simple tasks. "I keep thinking they'll come back," Sarah admitted during one such moment, "that Richardson's men will burst in and take it all away again." Beth would sit with her twin until the anxiety passed, their opposite heartbeats finding their natural rhythm. "They can't hurt us anymore. We're stronger together." The sisters established weekly community dinners where reunited families could share their challenges and triumphs. Mary Sullivan's Diner provided the food, and the old Hope Valley tradition of music therapy continued. Healing isn't just about the big moments, Beth observed one evening watching families connect over shared meals. It's in the small daily rituals, the quiet conversations, the simple act of being present. Emma and Lucy had their own healing moments. Sometimes they'd wake from nightmares about the time they spent homeless. On those nights, the entire family would gather in the kitchen, making pancakes at midnight, reinforcing that they were safe, together whole. Dr. Miller would be proud, Emma said one morning, watching another family plant their tree in the memory garden. He always said true healing happens in circles. The Genetic Matching Center had become a symbol of transformation. The very technology once used to separate families now helped reunite them. Beth had insisted on making all services free, funded by the Richardson Restitution Fund. "Every match," Sarah explained to her therapy group, "is another chance to heal not just a family, but a piece of our community's heart." As spring turned to summer, the evidence wall in the main hall filled with photographs families at different stages of their healing journey. Dr. Miller's picture held the central spot, his wise eyes watching over the growing community he'd helped create. Lucy often led visitors to this wall, pointing out her favorite stories. "See those sisters? They found each other on Pancake Day. And that family? They planted the big oak tree by the garage." The healing process touched everyone differently, but certain truths became clear. Reconciliation couldn't be rushed, trust had to be rebuilt slowly, and love, given time and nurturing, could bridge any gap. "We're not just healing families," Beth told a reporter who came to document Hope Valley's success. "We're healing the very idea of what family can be." The new Hope Valley bloomed far beyond its original vision. What had once been a small mental health clinic now sprawled across 10 acres, each building serving a different aspect of family reunification and healing. The main Victorian building, restored to its former glory, housed the mental health services. Sarah's office, once a symbol of her lost dreams, now overlooked the memory garden where dozens of family trees grew stronger each day. "We've added 3 new wings," Beth explained to a group of potential donors. "The Family Reunification Center, the Genetic Matching Laboratory, and the Children's Healing Space. But more importantly, we've added hope." Tom's construction crew had outdone themselves. The James Miller Memorial Garage became a vocational training center, teaching life skills to those rebuilding their lives. Emma spent every Saturday there, learning mechanics from Tom himself, carrying on Dr. Miller's legacy. "He taught me that fixing things isn't just about tools," she told her students. "It's about patience, understanding, and believing that broken things can be made whole again." The manor's conversion into temporary housing proved especially meaningful. Families in the process of reunion could stay as long as they needed, supported by a community that understood their journey. Lucy had taken charge of welcoming new families, showing them to their rooms with the same care her aunt had shown her that first rainy night. "And this is where we have pancake breakfast," she'd always say, because that's where families start healing. The clinic's success attracted attention from across the country. Other communities sought to replicate the model, leading Beth and Sarah to establish a training program for family reunification specialists. The key Sarah taught her students is treating the whole family system. Separation leaves scars on everyone, even those who weren't directly separated. Mary Sullivan's Diner had opened a satellite location on the grounds, becoming the heart of daily community life. Food brings people together, she'd say, serving up her famous comfort dishes, and together is where healing happens. The Genetic Matching Center, once a source of fear and separation, now represented hope. Its walls displayed success stories, photographs of reunited families, letters of gratitude, and artwork created by children finding their way back to wholeness. "We're not just matching DNA," Beth explained to visitors. "We're matching hearts that have been searching for each other across time and distance." The grounds included quiet spaces, 2 meditation gardens, reflection pools, and small chapels where families could process their emotions privately. Sarah had insisted on these sanctuary spaces, remembering her own journey back from the fog of forced medication. Emma's support groups for children grew so popular that they needed their own building. The Emma Bennett Children's Center opened its doors, featuring art therapy rooms, play spaces, and a special garage where kids could learn basic car maintenance. Because sometimes, Emma explained at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, fixing a car with someone helps you talk about fixing your heart. Lucy's memory garden flourished, each tree tagged with a family story. "This one's for Dr. Miller," she'd tell visitors, pointing to a sturdy oak. "And these twin saplings? They're for Mum and Aunt Beth." The community continued its traditions: weekly music nights, family dinners, and the special Whole Heart Day celebrations when new families were reunited. These gatherings, once small affairs in Mary's Diner, now filled the Hope Valley grounds with joy and music. "We're not just rebuilding a clinic," Beth told the board during their quarterly meeting. "We're creating a model for healing generational trauma through community support." Sarah, watching from her office window as another family planted their tree, smiled at the truth of it all. Hope Valley had been reborn, not as a single institution, but as a living, growing community dedicated to making broken families whole again. On the first anniversary of Hope Valley's rebirth, the sisters hosted a special dinner in the manor's restored dining room. The massive table, once a symbol of Beth's solitude, now barely contained their extended family. First, Beth announced, "Standing at the head of the table, we have an announcement. The Miller Bennett Foundation has officially received its endowment. Thanks to the settlement from Richardson's case, we can now fund family reunification programs nationwide." Sarah, seated beside her twin, continued, "But more importantly, we've made a personal decision. Emma, Lucy, we want to make this arrangement permanent. The east wing of the manor will be our family home, all of us together." The girls' reactions captured their personalities perfectly. Lucy squealed with delight, while Emma maintained her composure even as tears filled her eyes. "No more running?" Emma asked softly, her years of protecting Lucy evident in that simple question. "No more running," the sisters confirmed together. Mary Sullivan, now their honorary grandmother, raised her glass. "To permanent foundations in buildings and in hearts." The family's new living arrangement reflected their journey. Sarah and the girls had their own suite, while Beth maintained her rooms nearby. The shared spaces, kitchen, library, and garden became the heart of their daily lives. "It's like the story of the sisters in the storm," Lucy observed one evening as they all made dinner together. "But better, because now we have 2 moms and the best aunt ever." Emma, growing more confident in her security, had begun to show her playful side. She and Beth often spent evenings in the garage, planning improvements to Hope Valley's vocational programs. Dr. Miller taught me that everyone needs a skill they can be proud of, she explained, showing Beth her detailed drawings for a new training workshop. Sarah's recovery continued steadily. The fog of medication had lifted completely, replaced by a clear sense of purpose. She divided her time between clinical work and family life, finding the balance that had seemed impossible before. Sometimes, she told her therapy groups, the foundation you need isn't the one you originally planned. It's the one that builds itself around you when you least expect it. Beth, too, had found her equilibrium. The corporate warrior had softened, though her business acumen now served a different purpose. She applied her skills to expanding Hope Valley's reach, ensuring other families would have the same chance at reunion. The family established new traditions. Sunday pancake breakfasts remained sacred, but they added weekly movie nights, garden picnics, and monthly volunteer days at the center. Family isn't just about blood or DNA, Beth explained during a foundation meeting. It's about choosing to build something permanent together. Lucy's memory garden had grown into a small forest, each tree marking another family's journey toward wholeness. She and Emma spent hours there, doing homework beneath the branches, surrounded by the living history of hope. Mum, Emma asked one evening, as they all sat in the garden watching the sunset, "Do you ever miss our old life, before everything changed?" Sarah pulled her daughters close. "I miss nothing about separation. But I'm grateful for every step of the journey that brought us here, even the painful ones. They led us home." Beth touched her locket, matching her sister's gesture. "Home isn't just this place," she added. "It's who we are together. It's the foundation we've built on truth and healing." As night fell over Hope Valley, the lights in the manor windows glowed warm and welcoming. In the distance, they could hear music from the community center, another family celebrating their reunion. Dr. Miller once told me, Emma shared, her voice strong and clear, that the strongest foundations are built on broken ground, because broken things, when healed properly, become unbreakable. The family sat together in their garden, surrounded by the trees of memory and hope, their bonds strengthened by every storm they'd weathered. They had built something rare and precious, a foundation strong enough to support not just their own healing, but the healing of countless others.